Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. So, Seedcamp has just raised $320 million, and the pitch isn't just more of what have worked in the past. Today, I've got Will Bennett, who has to go and find the future on that thesis of atoms becoming more and more important in venture. Two things before we start. I have to say we are at EUVC, a small LP in this fund, as well as some past ones. So I'm not a neutral party here, but I am never, because I love all the people we have on the podcast.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
So we're going to talk about the 300 million raised. Now there's a dedicated pot of money for the first time ever to double down on winners. I'm going to be very curious, Will, to hear from you. Why is now the moment to plant the flag in the later stages?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Andreas. It's good to have you on our team as not a neutral party. First thing I should say is we are continuing to do a lot of the same. Like, we are still a pre-seed fund trying to be the first player to meet entrepreneurs and to build conviction. I think it's what we've excelled at for like 20 years. So that's absolutely staying the same. Look, in terms of the fund, so 220 is for the first check and follow on, and then 100 is for Series B plus investments, which will be in our portfolio, but that money is very much US capital. It'll be managed out of the US from our two teammates who are based there, alongside a whole suite of new products that we're building around kind of taking our businesses transatlantic, helping them go to market in the US, hiring in the US, and so on. So that's the idea behind the fund. A lot has stayed the same. I think we've always tried to bring US style, take our entrepreneurs to the US, and we just want to move past this kind of moment where European tech says go over there without really building the infrastructure to kind of make it successful. So that's part of the idea behind the new fund.
Tell me, Will, we're going to dive into that transatlantic bridge later, but I just want to double click on that 100 million for Series B plus investments. Why do you think that now is the time to really do that out of a Seedcamp a fund instead of, so to say, leaving it to the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess there's two sides to it. The first side is that we can continue to create Seedcamp specific value at that moment onwards. Like, we absolutely have the relationships to continue to create value. We have the team to do it. We have amazing people in-house working on talent, working on biz dev in the future, and so on. And we want to continue to bring that to our founders. I think where once upon a time seed stage funds would say something along the lines of, our job is to land you the best in class Series A, we think that our job is to be an amazing partner throughout the journey. Doesn't mean we stay on the board. Like, we would never take a board seat in the first place, but it means that we continue to kind of bring new things throughout the journey, and our proposition evolves throughout. So I think one thing we've always done amazingly is, like, when we do invest, it's the full team. And it might be the case going forwards that, I can speak to the entrepreneur first, but, my 5 other teammates would lead on supporting because they're in the US and, things evolve over the company's lifetime. And that's part of the thinking of the new fund, that as that happens along the journey, we can evolve our support. And that comes in with a kind of extra injection of capital at Series B and onwards.
Yeah. So let me say a couple of things about your returns, and then I will say something about your LP deck being public, because I think anyone who's in venture and trying to raise a fund themselves, be they more experienced or less, I would strongly advise anyone to go and search that deck out, because it is a resource that truly shows what you should be focusing on. And I have seen so many emerging managers trying to raise funds on the back of a deck that looks like a startup deck. And as a startup, you want to basically be raising on your dreams and what you can do in the future. Whereas if you're an investor, you really want to be raising on what have I done in the past and what can I guarantee you that I will be able to continue doing. And your deck does that so beautifully. Of course, you're also being very transparent about your returns, which I think everyone has to be, whether they're good or less clear. It's a story and it's going to be dug out. You have to just be, very decisive about how can I best describe my own story. Yours is great, 13x DPI on Fund 3, 5x on TVPI on Fund 4, which is obviously amazing. I want to ask you, you've raised on the back of these numbers on a cycle that used to be very SaaS and software driven. Now we're going into a time of venture, going very much more into atoms and the hardware and what some people would call more capital and tech development heavy place. Can you talk a bit about what that requires from you as a team and how your own thinking about where venture is headed is changing?
Yeah, so look, we've always actually been agnostic to the sectors that we invest in. Like we bring a prepared mind, we're reasonably smart, but not even nearly as smart as the people we work with on the other side. So we've never been out there building a thesis and kind of chasing down a startup, building in a certain area is the first thing. Like, of course, we're thinking about what are the most interesting markets over the next cycle, over the next decade, 2 decades, but we've never been out there kind of saying, hey, we just want this type of company. That said, for the last 15 years, the most exciting stuff has been software. Bits have been very easy to invest in, candidly, as well, because like everyone can understand it. It works ones and zeros. It mostly works. And in 2026, it's like incredibly easy to make it work without any technical knowledge. So whether that makes software more or less exciting, I actually think the jury's still out. Clearly, public markets are changing their opinion every half hour about this. But we are still seeing amazing software businesses in our portfolio perform really, really well, especially those that are willing to rip the Band-Aid off and build AI capabilities in-house, whether it makes their team go faster or makes their product agentic or whatever it might be. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, yeah, you're also right. We're investing in CapEx intensive industries. We've made a handful of investments in space technology, made a handful of investments in kind of core foundational AI models. Are we investing in like billion-dollar exception rounds? Less so. We are focused on like angles where often spinning out from the best universities in Europe where we have an edge. So that might be neurosymbolic learning or time series models based on healthcare data is like a really exciting company we have in the portfolio that I sadly can't tell you about because it hasn't been announced. But there are a bunch of like super exciting kind of CapEx intensive industries that have a lot of software in them. I think is one thing people are forgetting. Like, of course, these things like, are physical and they interact with the physical world a bit more, but there's a lot of software that goes into them. Like when we talk about robots and drones and so on, like half of it's software at least. So I think people are a little over their skis, but at the same time, yeah, absolutely. Like there are new moats emerging that seem to kind of be more physical.
Yeah. And I think in the end, the craft of venture is still the same. And as you say, software is still an important part. And honestly, software is very differentiated from old industry. So it's important to say that it is not now that VCs need to figure out how to invest in old industry. It's that VCs have to figure out how to invest in this new era of industry, which is then very different. So Will, you have a very hard task at hand because you're on a podcast representing Seedcamp, and we could talk all day about Seedcamp. And in many ways, that's the most interesting story every time we talk about Seedcamp or to Seedcamp, because what you've done, of course, is something to replicate for everyone in the industry. However, I just want to give you the chance to talk a bit about yourself. So tell me your journey. You've been with Fuse Energy, you've been with BCG. Those are very interesting stories to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So I left university after studying classics and didn't really have a clue on what I was going to do or what I might be good at. Tried consulting, wasn't good at it. Enjoyed it, teaches you to kind of sit up straight and professionalize. I then figured the startups might be a better fit for me. At the time, knew extremely little and emailed a bunch of people who were high profile, basically. One of which at the time was Fuse, because they'd just raised what was then the UK's biggest first round. And yeah, managed to work there it was actually only a year. So like take zero credit for the amazing things they've done. But it was, yeah, absolutely epic journey. And I think the team are now kind of closing in on 600 million run rate, which was, yeah, that's 4 years since I left. So still 3 years since I left. So still an amazing speed to scale. And yeah, and for me personally, just epic exposure to Charles and Alan, the way they did things, and the venture world, company building, you touch everything is one of those early hires, whether it's hiring, product, operations. We all did customer support all the time. If you have a consumer energy product, that thing breaks 24/7. So we did customer support 24/7, which was all awesome. And then, yeah, ended up at Seedcamp. I knew some of the team for a little while at BCG, and then had kind of got to know them through the startup ecosystem. And then when there was the chance, I obviously leapt on it, as you described, some of the amazing things that have come before at Seedcamp, which I had no part of. Yeah, it absolutely made sense to kind of come on board as soon as I can.
Yeah. We always talk about scar tissue from the operator world and that type of thing. can you just give your super blunt view on the importance of that as an investor and what it's given you?
Yeah, I think the main thing is it builds like masses of empathy. Like you see what it takes to get a complex product into the world and to make it robust. That's really useful, especially today when I think there's a bit of a sense that it's just easy to build product. That's still not true. There's still a million integrations and so on. So it gives you loads of empathy for that. The other side I think is worth mentioning is that the best investors that have done this job were not operators in many cases. And I think like everyone who's been in a startup fights their bias of like the thing that worked for them. And, you know, I've seen it in the job. Like people give the advice that kind of was super effective some number of years ago. And I've definitely heard myself do it. That is like the downside of operating is like you probably have only seen one or two success stories. Whereas on the venture side, hopefully you'll see like many that go really well and not so well. And both experiences are actually really useful. Honestly, the operating stuff, it's more just like you have a first-hand sense of the toll it takes to build an amazing company. But that's it.
Well, so I could now say, so you've raised a massive fund, much bigger than last time, so on and so forth. I've done that many times with Carlos on the podcast, and every time Carlos says, well, Andreas, if you look at valuations and how like venture inflation is really working, we've stayed more or less the same, at least since Fund 3. It's just grown with the market. That said, tell me how you're thinking about the current market and how it's developing in terms of valuation inflation and that type of thing. The cost to play is getting very, very high, especially in some of the hotter sectors. And obviously you're fishing in the same ponds as many of the other very best firms that are investing in Europe. So for that reason, you often find yourself, of course, in a bit of a fight with all the other big firms, so to say.
Those other firms are our friends for sure. But yeah, no, of course you go head to head.
Best friends fight a lot, right?
Best friends fight a lot, exactly. So look, the bell curve has got longer. We are still able to do inception check writing when there is just amazing people. And that's like what Seedcamp's amazing at. There is then this whole curve of like amazing glossy operators who command a high valuation. There's, you know, businesses that just should be capitalized with more money. So our fund is designed, we can partake in all those different kind of prototypes of a founding moment. I think, you know, our aim is to mostly lead and co-lead deals in this fund, but we're well aware that some of the best companies to come out of Europe in the next 3 years will need to raise a whole chunk of money straight off the bat. And that is not because they are like more amazing than anyone else. It's just that for their business model, they should have more money. And we're not about to undercapitalize like the continent's winners. So that's a little bit the reason that in this fund, we will be able to do that. So that's part of the reason for more money. But yeah, I mean, a big part of it is also, as you mentioned, Carlos describing, there's been a hell of a lot of inflation in what software can do and what tech can do. What I would say is that if you look back on some of the seed funds from 2005 to 2015, they got in at these valuations that when you look back, it's like venture was a crazy job back then. Like as if you were able to invest in companies in that way. So if you look at some of those amazing funds like First Round and USB and ourselves, brilliant. Should the entrepreneurs have been able to have a high price at that first moment? Maybe. Like any asset class of investing that can turn money into 20 times what you had at the start have got a good deal, right? So I think there's a bit of like things leveling out and people getting smart.
Will, how do you think about staying with the companies from first stage to later stage and how that's developed? And how do you think about the importance of both having follow-on capital, which you clearly have now made grown the fund into and raised a dedicated fund to be able to do, but also putting together syndicates of stronger investors around you? How are you seeing that move and change in the market? We just discussed for best friends fight, but at the same time, venture is a very collaborative sport.
Yeah, I'll answer the second bit first on the syndicates, because it's like a massive part of the way we do things. I think Seedcamp got its start through a lot of community. Like our early ICs were up the rest of the venture community in Rushmore. So being connected to other funds, making sure we're paying it forward is massive. So the way we think about it is even when we lead, we 100% create space for everyone we think that can add value to that journey. So whether it's a micro fund, whether it's a bunch of angels, whether it's a co-lead in the ecosystem or in the US, we want to do that and syndicate the round to give the entrepreneur the best chance of success. What rarely makes sense at this point in time is like we could come in and try to own 50% or something like this. But why would the entrepreneur want a smaller network rather than a bigger network? Like obviously you want a syndicate. And I think we see our role, especially in cases where we're committing first to a deal and bringing that together and helping the entrepreneur shape it.
Will, I'd love to ask you about the Seedcamp Nation. It's one of the really big value adds of yours. It's one of the things that we have seen firsthand how well it works. Can you talk about the power of being now on Fund 8, 7? 7. And I was thinking, V11, what does that add up to? That's hard for me. So tell me, what the Seedcamp Nation, what is it? How is it? How are you leveraging it? What are founders getting out of it? And of course, how does it differentiate you from others?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just have an enormous benefit of having been doing this for 2 decades. And, however you count the successes in the portfolio, there's a lot of them. And the promise has always been that if you are the newest investment, you kind of get access to that entire community. And likewise, when we invested in those companies back in the day, they received it. And there is this cycle of, because we only ever do pre-seed, we do think that the founders that we've backed should know each other. They have much better insights into the best way to do many, many things than we ever would. We often just act as the conduit between them. So that's 6 funds of people. Obviously, some of the best conversations are with people at the same stage as you. Some of them will be 1 stage ahead, but some of them are just like pure mentorship and inspiration of folk who are several steps ahead or who have done a thing that you want to do in 2 years and it's top of mind because you need to plan it, like, getting some weird fintech regulation from the SEC, and someone else has like literally done it. And it might be that there's only 5 companies in the world, but luckily we're invested in some of them. So that's a big part of it. And the way we think about it is we have all these companies on in WhatsApp and different communities. So whether it's by geography or by, what you're focusing on right now, like how to build an AI, we manage that very, very carefully. And I think it's a big part of like how we think of like creating value every single day is making sure the right people are getting to know each other in Seedcamp Nation.
Yeah. And of course, as every year, Christmas comes early because it feels like Christmas all over again with your extended family when the Seedcamp AGM happens. And it's happening today, the same day as, of course, you announced the fund. So now let me go to another question, which is about the transatlantic bridge that you're building and you're doubling down on with this fund. You have 2 people in the US now. I'd love to hear how you're doing it, we've spoken a bit about why you think it's important, but I think it's interesting to explore how you're executing on that as a firm that's bridging to the US.
Yeah, so we've always kind of thought of ourselves as kind of US capital and brought a US angle, whether it's from speed or network or customer development. At the end of the day, you have to be there to really bring a world-class product on any of those things. So what we've done is, 2 of our colleagues are now based there, and they will lead on helping our companies go to market, helping them hire talent, and so on. I think there's this kind of thing in Europe where people can't quite decide whether there's like European excellence and sovereignty and all this, but like you also need to go to the US, and like, is that a conflict and a contradiction or not? I think it's not a contradiction. Like, to build a massive business, you need to be in massive markets. And we just wanted to move forwards and basically become one of the very, very few funds to have can say, we're investing in entrepreneurs over here, but we're going to unlock this market, like the whole world market. So that's kind of the thinking. And frankly, it's been fairly seamless. We've always all spent lots of time going back and forth to support our companies over there, many of whom will move faster and faster and faster. I think, 3 of the investments I've been involved in this year were based there by the time we wired the money, right? Like, they're European teams and they have like an extremely European angle, but they want to be near their customers and we want to help them with that. So hopefully that kind of, clarifies a bit.
Well, 13x DPI on Fund 3, 5x, I believe, TVPI on Fund 5. What will be the categories that will drive similar returns in Fund 7?
If I knew that, Andreas. No. Look, it's going to be amazing entrepreneurs. I can share a bit about the topics we've invested in the last 12, 18 months. I have no idea what we are going to find exciting in
Hopefully
another.
one of them.
What did you say?
I said, hopefully it'll be one of them. Share
Yeah,
where
hopefully
you
one of them.
share where you've been focusing the last 12 months.
Yeah, so we've invested in topics like eyewear. We think we've found like the best company to build wearables. We've invested in several different types of models that I mentioned earlier. We've invested in space several times. We are invested heavily in different verticals where we think that, you know, the TAM for services and work is extremely big and innovation is extremely low. So on your BCG 2x2, it's that top quadrant, whether that's logistics or manufacturing or insurance, I think have all been exciting for us. Yeah, look, I think that's like top of mind today. I wish I knew what we will figure out is exciting in 6 months. And I think that's the privilege of pre-seed. Like, you have to listen carefully because we don't have the benefit of being able to zoom out and look at 5 different companies coming through a Series A and kind of compare against each other. We have to believe in the entrepreneurs that we meet and believe in ourselves that we're meeting the best entrepreneurs, and what they're saying about what their specific insight in the market is differentiated. You know, we would be doing a bad job if we went around kind of like with our thesis that's probably a bit out of date because we don't operate in these markets and looking for like a specific thing.
All generalists are coming to terms with the fact that they have to wrap their head around other things than pure software. You're quite far along on that journey. You've always been doing some investments that are capital intensive, but clearly it's a bigger part of the newer portfolio. I'd love to ask you, what would be your main piece of advice to other generalists, or what do you see generalists maybe not doing the way they should be when they're moving into this more atom-heavy world?
Interesting. I think that people probably get really, really caught up in technical diligence. I think because ones and zeros were very, very easy to understand and almost always worked, there's this philosophy that everything else might not work, or it's a science project or something like this. And you can kind of battle test these things to see if it works. But at the end of the day, like, software doesn't work when people don't like it. That was the definition of software not working. Just because you could click through to the end of your user journey, people kind of thought the software always works, whereas hardware wouldn't. That's kind of not the right framing. Maybe a better framing is like, software doesn't work if people don't enjoy the experience. Hardware doesn't work if it doesn't work because it breaks or falls apart. The user journey is just like less of a phenomenon when, you know, a robot is operating autonomously and you can't even see it. Like, user journey is like the wrong thinking. And likewise with a model, like, it's training overnight. That's part of the product. When it runs inference, like, no one's watching anything happen. Like, if it breaks, it's probably downstream somewhere in like the way you've set up your memory or latency with the data center. So, you know, I think the definition of tech quality is something that people are kind of wrapping their heads around a bit.
Yeah. Tell me just one question here. How important are specialists for you when you're investing and building the syndicates around the founders that you back?
Yeah, we love to bring in specialists, whether it's like an angel who is working in that industry or a fund who focuses on that industry. It's fantastic. So, I mean, defense is a really good example because I'd like to think we have great connections in kind of UK, Germany, France, and other countries to buyers of defense technology. Are we spending all of our time making that our thing? No, like, there are also amazing funds that kind of focus on that very, very specifically, and we love to bring them in. So, like, it's really, really important. It's like 100% the best thing for entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, and this is one of the things I love about Seedcamp. You're not grabby about ownership percentages. Rather, you're trying to get the founders set up for an awesome path forward. And for that reason, to me, you're the best port of call in so many cases because you can go, you have someone who understands the venture journey and who will not be grabby and keep other people that should be around the cap table out. I love you and the team, so thank you for coming on the podcast and congrats on the race, my friend.
Thanks so much, man. Catch you soon.